Welcome to the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, where we keep leadership practical and real. Just a quick reminder, we're focusing on building sustainable influence. So if you haven't yet, be sure to follow the show and sign up for the newsletter to stay in the loop. I'm Scott, and as always, I'm here with our go-to leadership expert, Dr. Michael David Morales, aka Mo.
What's up, dude? I am ready for this story. You gave me a little sneak peek, but now I'm intrigued. Give it to me.
Did. And when I got the topic for this week, this was the first thing that jumped into my head. And what a great example of history, of real history, I should say, to outline what we're going to talk about today. But in case you don't know, King Arthur was a legendary ruler of the kingdom of Camelot. He was known for uniting the kingdoms of Britain and creating what was called a round table, probably the thing he was the most famous for. And it became a symbol of equality, justice, and shared leadership. Though often remembered for his sword, Excalibur, his real strength was how he brought people together. And back in the early days of Camelot, Arthur had a bit of a problem. So his court was growing incredibly fast, and his knights were coming from all over the kingdom. And that was really great. But it also meant a mix of really strong personalities, old grudges, and a lot of regional pride. Arguments started popping up all over the place, not necessarily on the battlefield, but in actual roundtable meetings. And some knights didn't trust each other, and a few even threatened to actually leave the round table and the organization. Instead of tightening control or giving orders, King Arthur did something smart. He hit pause. He brought everyone together and said, hey, from now on, we're going to make decisions together. Every voice at the table was going to matter, not just his. And that made a shift. And Arthur led by example. He actually got rid of his throne and started sitting with knights as equals. He encouraged open conversation, let people disagree, and started pairing up the knights from different regions to lead missions together. And he rotated leadership roles, gave newer voices a chance, and built a culture where no one person was at the center of everything. It wasn't about who had the most power. It was more about who had the best ideas. And people started to buy in. They saw that their input mattered, and that made them invest in each other's success. And for an example, or I should say a real world historical example, it paid off big time when the Saxons threatened to invade his kingdom. Instead of just waiting for Arthur to come up with a plan, a few knights, most notably Lancelot, Tristan, and Gareth, stepped up and designed one plan together. They each brought something different to the table: strategy, some naval knowledge, local terrain knowledge. And Arthur didn't shut it down or take over. He backed them up and helped them shape it, but with the rest of the group. And the plan worked. They won not because of one brilliant leader, one brilliant plan, but because they trusted each other and worked together as a team. And that's ultimately what made Camelot and King Arthur's kingdom so special, that it wasn't just King Arthur's kingdom, it was everybody's. And I know today we're diving into something similar to that, not so much swords, arrows, shields, and an Excalibur, but we're jumping into the idea of what it means to build a collaborative culture, similar to that culture at Camelot, just in a modern day. So Mo, why don't you take us away with this first point today?
Yeah, before I do, my favorite thing about King Arthur is his all-purpose flour. Have you ever used it?
Gosh.
It's high in protein. So if you've never tried King Arthur's all-purpose flour, you got to give it a go. The other thing that I think about when I think about King Arthur is the very important movie culturally, Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
It's so ironic you bring that up. I just watched a clip with John Cleese, who's one of the main actors in it, talking about making that film. And I don't know if you knew this, but they had the smallest budget to make this film. And all the castle scenes are shot at one castle, because in Scotland, they would only let them shoot in one castle. They just shot it in different parts, dressed it up differently. And their budget was so small, they actually couldn't afford horses. And that's why they came up with the coconut bit. It wasn't so much like, oh, this is an original, like, we're going to add this from the beginning. It was like, no, we can't afford horses. So like, what can we do?
Dude,
and
that's so good.
It's such a good movie.
You got to send me that clip that you just watched. I want to see it. So I'm glad that I could add value to your story, which is exactly what you were hoping, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, Scotty, culture is one of my favorite, if not my favorite thing to talk about. Leaders, you focused on the culture, and that's what we're going to get into. First point is this: respect is the root of collaboration. The collaboration, and a couple of the knights got together and they decided to come up with some battle plans based on their expertise. King Arthur, if he had a huge ego, which he's a king, so I'm sure he did, but he could have totally let that get in the way and said, oh, no, I've already thought about this, what we're going to do. But instead, he backed his guys. So Collaboration is something that you should be doing on a daily basis, leaders. Collaboration just doesn't thrive with trust. Starts with respect. Trust is the bottom building block. I cannot stress how important that trust for your team is. In fact, Google Project Aristotle that studied what makes great teams successful. This is what it revealed. Psychological safety was the number one factor. People need to feel
Mm.
safe in their ideas. What's funny about your story, Scott, is that's exactly what King Arthur did. He let his guys feel safe in bringing their ideas to the table, to the round table, right? And so there's a great real world example that comes from the book. And I'm going to talk about a couple of stories from the book. But there's a company and it's called IDEO. It's a global design firm and they create all this cutting edge stuff, technology, hospital experiences. They do it all. And their principle that they live by is, quote, defer judgment, close quote. Defer judgment. Every team member, doesn't matter how much or how little experience you have, is encouraged to contribute ideas. That respect led them to some of the most creative and impactful innovations around the world. In fact, they were tasked with making an updated shopping cart. And you can look it up, and it's a cool design. And you think to yourself, why a shopping cart? Because that's what they do. I wish I was on that shopping cart team because how many of us have gone to the store and three of the wheels are great and then that fourth wheel is just spinning on its own? And so we all say to ourselves, man, somebody needs to make a better shopping cart. Well, this company did. So you can thank them if you ever get to use one of those. The bottom line is this, Scott. As a leader, you set the tone. Leaders are you setting the tone for your people. You need to listen actively to them. You need to give them credit where credit is due. And you need to encourage all the voices to create an atmosphere where people feel safe to engage. Because respect is not just a soft skill, as sometimes we say there's hard skills and then there's soft skills. It's not just a soft skill, it's a strategic advantage that's going to lift you above your competitors.
Talked a lot about trust, and that resonated with me and made me think a lot about the five dysfunctions of a team. If I'm remembering it correctly, when the new CEO in the story is explaining the five dysfunctions, she starts with the first one and explains it as a pyramid. And we all know, like when you look at a pyramid, the bottom level is the biggest, and that one she labels as trust. But that right there, another great example, another great book, but just again shows how important it is to trust an individual.
Absolutely. That's the solid foundation because the first dysfunction is the absence of trust. If your people don't trust you, they're not going to be vulnerable. And you need to create trust so your people are going to be vulnerable and be able to come to the table. And that's why there's a lot that goes into the saying there's no dumb ideas. And you really have to take that to heart. When you sit around the table and you say, all right, we got to figure this out. People need to feel like they can say the most outlandish, craziest, stupidest thing. And people are they might laugh and say, hey, we might be able to try that. So leaders, do your people trust you? Are you building that rock of foundation? We take teams through the five dysfunctions. That's one of the main things that I've done over the years. When we get down, we start doing some exercises together, leaders, I'll bet you that your team doesn't trust you as much as you think they do, but they should.
It's also important when you're thinking about that from a leadership perspective to remember that for the majority of people, trust in their ideas has not been something that they've experienced. Whether it's growing up through school, whether it's a job, whatever it may be, so many people are quick to say, well, that was just a dumb idea. And that right there can have such a profound effect of just shutting down that person from trusting that they can actually share their ideas. It sounds like we got an idea for another episode here. So, but to keep us on track here and moving into that second section, I know you're going to talk about what I love and I think is so important, chapter 2 in one of my favorite books, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about what it means to have a why behind something?
So leaders, you have to clarify the why behind the things that you're doing. If you don't do that, your people, they're going to get burnt out. They're going to get frustrated. They're going to leave. And remember, people don't leave companies. They leave managers. So don't be a bad manager. Don't be a bad leader. And too often teams get caught up in what they're doing and lose sight of the why. Cannot lose sight of the why, leaders. When a group is aligned and they have the same purpose, collaboration and coordination together, it's going to become a movement. That's what you want from your team. So I'm interested, Scotty, what did you get from Jocko in knowing the why and getting that in front of your team.
I think one of the big things that chapter is so great. And I think one of the big things is creating a unified front. And so it's not necessarily that everybody will 100% agree, but they need to buy in to the understanding of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. And that creates a unified goal for every single person in your organization. You're all working together. You're all working with the understanding of what you're trying to accomplish. And you understand the reasoning why you're doing something. And I think there's so many times too, and Jocko talks a little bit about it, where you're doing something, I don't understand why we're doing this. Comprehending and explaining that, even when maybe it seems trivial, can be so important to building those relationships with those around you. And Jocko does a great job in that chapter of explaining why that's so.
And I love the stuff that Jocko puts out. In this book, Coyle talks about what it means to establish purpose. It's a huge part of culture. And he says you need to make the mission visible. And he uses SEAL Team 6 as one of the stories that he tells. What he said about SEAL Team 6 is they have to communicate with one another without even saying a word. That's how well they know each other. So Coyle observed that the SEALs reinforce core values. Leaders, do you know the core values of your company? And the second part is, do the people on your team know the values? Do they know the mantras? Do they know the symbols? Do they know what's important? Do they know the constant rehearsal of why you're doing what you're doing? Because that constant reinforcement is going to let people know, wow, this boss, this leader, this supervisor cares about alignment. They care about cohesion. And for the SEALs, it was life and death. For most of us, it's not life and death, but we can learn something from SEAL Team 6. As Coyle says in his book, The Culture Code, SEAL Team 6 doesn't just train skills, they train identity. Gosh, I love that. Leaders, what is the identity of your team? Because when people know exactly what they're a part of, it brings the best out of them. My leadership tip with this story is don't assume that your team remembers the mission. Don't assume that they remember the core values. You have to repeat it, you have to live it, you have to display it over and over in your own life. You have to make it visual with things around the office. You need to talk about it in meetings and emails and systems. And I'll leave you with this last story. I always put out my Monday morning email. And in that Monday morning email, I do what's called housekeeping items. And I just talk about, hey, this is what we need to get done this week. But then the second part is this. I always talk about one of the core values within whatever our team is. And usually there's about 20 to 25 values, depending on what the team is and where they are. I reinforce it. People start to buy into it. And this is the really cool part. I know that they've bought into it when I start asking team members, would you like to talk about one of the core values? We're on core value number 7 this week. And then you have people on the team tell the rest of everybody else within that Monday morning email what that core value means to them. Your team will start to grab on and they will buy in. And as soon as you get the buy-in leaders, that's when you get to start shifting the culture exactly where you need it.
Great question to maybe ask yourself, or leaders can ask themselves is, are your core values a part of your conversation or just on your website? You can find core values everywhere on everybody's website, but are they bringing those core values into the workplace, into daily or weekly or just conversation in general? Or are they something that's like, everybody else has these, let's put them on the website, we'll just go about our business? Mo, do you have any final thoughts for us today?
I have one quick thought, leaders. No matter where you lead, whether it's business, the classroom, a church, your local YMCA, a softball team, your little kids' ballet class, collaboration doesn't happen by accident. It grows out of culture, and that culture should be of respect and a shared sense of purpose. So remember, you are the one who defines that culture. And if you don't make sure that you are teaching how you want the culture to be, culture will happen. And trust me, you do not want to let culture happen because it's not going to be what you want it to be. And it's going to frustrate you and it's going to frustrate your team.
What a great reminder to kind of finish on there, that culture will happen regardless of what you do. And so as a leader, influence culture in the way that you want it to be influenced. That's best for you. That's best for your employees. That's best for your team and best for the company overall. What a great reminder there. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. We appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed the episode, take a second and rate, review, subscribe. It helps push us up in that algorithm so more folks can find this show. And don't forget to hit up rtclc.com to sign up for our monthly newsletter where we drop extra tips and insights that you won't hear on this podcast. Until next time, lead with purpose, stay authentic, and make an impact.